Valley County, Montana Territory. Late fall, 1887. Most settlers built their fireplaces the same way, against a wall. Fire in plain sight, smoke straight up, heat rising fast to the rafters, then bleeding out into the cold. Lemuel Voss, a stonemason trained to trust what worked instead of what looked right, was doing the opposite. He was digging a fire chamber 34 inches below the floor of his new cabin. Not beside the room, under it. From that buried chamber, he meant to drive heat and smoke through a 4-6-foot flue laid beneath the floor itself. Then send the last of it out through a chimney on the far wall. Men stopped their wagons just to stare. One called it backward, another called it crazy. A third looked at the hole, then at Lemuel's wife Miriam, then at the 2 small children nearby, and said the same thing everyone else was thinking. That is not a fireplace. That is a grave waiting to fill with smoke. Lemuel kept digging. He did not argue. He did not explain twice. He set stone, measured slope, checked the run, built as if winter were already watching, and winter would watch. Because when the deadliest cold of that country came down hard enough to drive the mercury to 42 below, ordinary cabins would eat wood all night and still leave their floors frozen. Men would wake in the dark to feed flames that could not hold a room. But in Lemuel Voss's cabin, the heat would rise from where life was actually lived, from the floor. Join Lemuel on his incredible journey to prove the impossible. Hit that subscribe button and like the video to discover how he changed the battle against the cold. Lemuel Voss had not come to that ground empty-handed. Years before he ever set a stake in Valley County, he had moved from camp to camp, job to job, working as a hired stonemason across scattered settlements where winter decided who stayed and who disappeared. He learned fast, because the land did not allow slow men to keep their work. Long before Montana, he had spent a season under an old stove mason from Alsace-Lorraine, a quiet tradesman who did not build fireplaces for show. He built them to hold heat the way a man holds water in a drought. That man taught one rule above all others. Fire is not something to admire. It is something to make work. He showed Lemuel how heat could be forced to travel before it escaped. How smoke, if given the right path, would surrender its warmth into stone instead of carrying it away. How a long flue run, properly sloped and sealed, could turn a short burn into hours of stored heat. In poorer settlements, where iron stoves were rare and wood was never enough, variations of the same idea appeared in simpler forms. Heat pushed under benches, warmth drawn through packed earth, fire made to pass beneath the places where people actually sat, slept, and lived. None of it was hidden knowledge. It was simply slow knowledge. And most men, when they reached new land, chose speed instead. They built fast, burned hot, lost heat faster than they could replace it. Lemuel did not forget what he had seen. He carried it. Quietly, across distance, across years. And when he finally stood on his own ground in Montana, he did not try to invent something new. He built what he knew the fire had been trying to do all along. He had seen what happened when men built the other way. His first winter in Montana was not spent in his own cabin. It was spent in a rented one, built the way nearly every man in that territory understood heat. A hearth set against the wall, a wide opening, a strong, open flame. It looked right. It sounded right. It burned hard, and it failed in a quieter way. Night after night, the fire would climb hot and fast. The air near the rafters turned thick, almost choking. Heat gathered where no one lived. Meanwhile, the floor just a few feet below stayed hard and dead. Cold crept through the boards, up through boots, into bone. Men dragged chairs close to the fire, pulled their feet up, sat curled like they were trying to escape the ground itself. When they slept, they chose height, bunks, tables, anything that kept them off the floor. They were not short on fire. They were short on where that fire worked. Wood disappeared fast. Flames stayed bright, but the room never truly held warmth. It only borrowed it briefly, near the source, before losing it again. Lemuel never argued about it. He watched how much wood it took, watched where the heat gathered, watched where it failed. And what he saw was simple. The fireplace was not weak. It was working hard in the wrong direction. It spent its strength heating empty air above a man's head, while the place that mattered most, the ground he stood on, the boards his children would walk on, remained untouched, burning hard, living cold. That was the system most men trusted. Lemuel did not. By the time 1887 came around, Lemuel Voss had seen enough of that failure to stop accepting it. He had saved what he could, took a claim in Valley County, cleared the ground, set his stakes. From a distance, it looked like any other cabin, beginning lines stretched tight, corners squared, a shape rising out of open land. But those stakes were not only marking walls, they were marking something beneath them. A path, a narrow, turning run that cut under the future floor, shifting direction where no wall stood, bending where no doorway would ever be. That was where Nels Halverson, a seasoned homesteader who had wintered more seasons than most men survived, stepped in to look closer. He studied the lines, the depth, the layout. "Root cellar?" he asked. Lemuel did not look up from his work. No. He set another mark, measured the distance again before speaking. "Fireplace." Nels paused, not confused, not amused, just still. "Fireplace don't go under a man's feet," he said. Lemuel drove the next stake into the ground. "This one will." A short silence followed. Wind moving through open land, no argument filling it. Then Lemuel added, plain and final, "Heat don't get to leave until it's done its work." Nels looked at him for a long moment. There was no laughter in it, no quick dismissal, only the weight of a man who had watched too many others trust ideas that sounded right and freeze for it. "That's not how a fireplace is built," he said at last. Lemuel did not answer, because the line had already been drawn, and from that point forward, there were only two sides left, the way it had always been done, and what he was about to prove. The ground had been marked. The work had begun, but the hardest resistance did not stand outside the stakes. It stood inside the home. Miriam Voss, his wife, did not object out of pride. She did not care what the neighbors said. She cared about what she could see too clearly. Fire, under the floor, smoke moving beneath the place her children would sleep. When Lemuel showed her the cut where the combustion chamber would sit, 34 inches down, and traced the path of the flue beneath the cabin, she did not see a system. She saw failure. Stone cracking under heat, smoke slipping through seams, air turning wrong in the night. She saw Caleb and Ruth lying still before morning, not from cold, but from something worse, something silent. "You're putting fire under them," she said. Lemuel did not rush to answer. He pointed to the layout again, slower this time. "The smoke won't be loose," he said. "It stays inside the stone, sealed runs, clean out ports here and here." He tapped two marked points. "Draw has to hold, slope keeps it moving. It don't stop under the floor." Miriam did not move closer, because she was not measuring slope, she was measuring risk. And risk, in that place, did not forgive mistakes. Lemuel let the silence sit between them before adding one thing more. Not louder, not softer, just final. "I ain't doing this to be different." He looked past her, toward where the floor would be, where the children would stand. "I'm doing it so they don't grow up with cold under their feet every winter." That was the line. Not pride, not invention, a decision. Because if he was wrong, this house would not fail slowly. It would fail all at once, and take everything with it. Word spread the way it always did on the frontier, fast, uneven, and sharpened as it moved. By the time Lemuel Voss hauled his second load of stone, men were already talking. At the mercantile, at the lumberyard stove, along the porch of the post office. Some laughed outright. "Man's burying his own fire," one said. Another shook his head, slower. "That ain't burial. That's suffocation. The details shifted with each retelling, but the shape stayed the same. Fire under the floor, smoke running farther than the room itself, a chimney set where no chimney ought to be. Wrong wall, wrong place, wrong idea. Elias Crow, the general store owner who had watched enough winters to know talk was cheap and cold was not, said little. He only listened. Kept track, not of opinions. Of specifics. Depth, distance, direction. Because in that country, details decided outcomes, not confidence. Others were less careful. Too complicated, one man said. This land don't reward complicated. Another answered without looking up from his gloves. This land kills complicated. Lemuel heard all of it. He stood at the counter, ordered lime, sand, flat stone, a cast iron grate, paid in full, loaded his wagon. No correction, no defense, no second explanation, because the judgment had already been passed, not by Winter, by men who had not yet faced it. Lemuel did not need them to understand. Not now. He needed them to remember. Because when the cold came real cold, the kind that stripped a house down to its truth, there would be no more talk to lean on. Only what held, and what failed. The ground softened just enough to take a shovel. That was when the real work began. Lemuel Voss cut down through the soil, measuring as he went, until the chamber reached 34 inches below the floor line. He set the firebox in thick stone, tight joints, squared edges, no gaps wide enough for guesswork. From there, he opened the main flue and began to carry it inward under the space where the cabin would stand. It was slow work, heavy, exact. Stone laid, lifted, reset, slope checked, then checked again. At first, the system held. Then it didn't. On the second turn of the flue, where the channel bent and narrowed before running deeper into the cabin, Lemuel lit a test fire. Not for warmth, for truth. The flame held steady, the smoke did not. It slowed at the bend, dragged, left a thicker stain along one wall of the channel. Soot gathered where it should have passed clean. That was enough. He did not argue with it, did not explain it away. He broke it open, pulled stone back out, dug deeper, adjusted the throat of the channel, widened one section, tightened another, changed the angle just enough to keep the draw alive through the turn. Then he sealed it again, this time using a heavier mix clay, sand, and ash, worked thicker into the joints to handle the expansion that would come with real heat. It cost him days, more stone, more labor, more strength than the first build had taken, and from the outside, it looked like failure. Men passing by saw only this: work undone, ground reopened, time lost, too much thinking, someone muttered. Another man didn't stop walking. Told you, systems fighting itself, but Lemuel did not build for their eyes. He built for what the fire was telling him, because fire did not lie, smoke did not guess. It followed the path it was given and showed where that path was wrong. So he corrected it, not to be right, but to make the system right. Because a system like this did not forgive pride. It either worked, or it failed where no man could fix it, later buried beneath the floor, when winter had already come. Once the flaw was corrected, Lemuel Voss did not rush forward. He slowed down, because now, every piece had to hold. He rebuilt the channel, from that second turn onward, carrying the flue deeper beneath the cabin until the full run reached 46 feet. At each bend, he left access cleanout ports set where a man could reach in later, not guess at what was hidden. Nothing was left blind. Each section of the flue was lined with flat stone, chosen not for appearance, but for how it let air move without catching. The joints were packed tight, with the heavier mixed clay, sand, and ash pressed deep so it would flex when heat came and not crack when the cold returned. Too loose, and smoke would escape. Too tight, and the system would choke. There was no middle ground by accident. It had to be made. When the channels were sealed, Lemuel set the capstones 5 inches thick, each one laid with care so weight sat evenly across the run. Stone over flue, pressure over passage. Then came the layer above. Screened sand, packed down by hand. No voids, no soft spots. And finally, the living surface stone pavers set across the floor, each one aligned, fitted, leveled. Not for looks, for contact, for transfer. Miriam watched much of it without speaking. She had expected something rough, improvised. Risk taken quickly. What she saw instead was slow, measured, deliberate in a way that did not leave space for carelessness. Still, she did not trust it yet, because she understood something even without the terms for it. If this failed, it would not fail where they could see it. It would fail beneath them, sealed in, hidden under the very ground they would depend on. By the time the last stone was set, the cabin did not sit on empty space. It sat on mass, a body of stone and channel and sealed path that held no heat yet but was built to take it, carry it, and keep it. Not a fireplace beneath a floor. Something else. Something waiting. Not for fall, for judgment. By late August, the work was no longer about building. It was about finding out if it would breathe. Lemuel Voss began with a dry draw test. No real fire, just air pulled through the system, watching how it moved, where it hesitated, where it held. Then he lit a small fire, not for heat, for truth. He did not stand by the chamber, did not watch the flame for comfort. Instead, he stepped onto the floor and moved slowly across it, stopping at measured intervals. Palm down, waiting, listening. The heat did not rise fast. It did not announce itself. It came in a quieter way through the stone, through the mass beneath his feet. A lantern sat near one of the clean-out hatches. Its flame told its own story. Before, it had leaned, flickered, searched for direction. Now it held steadier. Not still, but controlled. The draw was alive, moving clean. No choke, no backflow. No hesitation at the turn that had once failed. Miriam stood near the doorway, watching without stepping forward. She had expected something obvious. A rush of heat. A sign that demanded belief. What she saw instead was slower. The floor did not turn hot. It changed, from cold to less cold, from dead to holding something. Lemuel said nothing. He moved again, tested another point, then another. Only after he had crossed the full span did he step back, wipe his hand once against his coat, and reach for the small notebook he kept. He wrote a single line. Draw steady. Heat traveling farther than first trial. No smile, no relief. But something had shifted. The system was no longer an idea. It had answered. And for the first time, it had answered correctly. The system had answered once. Now it had to carry weight. By early October, Lemuel Voss prepared for the first full firing. Not a test. Not a brief burn. A sustained heat meant to fill the stone beneath the cabin and hold there. He fed the chamber with dry cottonwood mixed with box elder and a few harder pieces of oak he had saved. Not too fast, not too slow. Enough to build a steady burn that would push heat deep into the flue without overwhelming the draw. Hours passed. The fire worked unseen. No open flame in the room. No bright center to gather around. Only the quiet labor beneath the floor. By late afternoon, the change could be felt. Not sharp, not sudden. Even. The stone underfoot no longer resisted the body. It gave back, a low, steady warmth that did not fade with distance. Miriam stood at the center of the room. At first, she kept her boots on. She shifted her weight once. Then again, waited. Then slowly, without speaking, she bent down and pulled them off, stocking feet on stone. She did not step away. She stood there, still, because this was not the kind of warmth she knew. It did not come from a corner, did not rise and vanish. It came from beneath her, from where life actually stood. Across the room, Lemuel watched only long enough to see that she stayed. Then he turned back to the fire, adjusted nothing, and let the system continue its work. But outside, the judgment had not changed. Nels Halvorsen stepped in, boots still dusted with early frost. He crossed the room, crouched once, and pressed his hand flat against the stone. He held it there longer than expected. Then he stood. "It's warmer," he said, not impressed, not dismissive, just exact. Then he looked at Lemuel. "That don't mean much yet." A pause. "The real cold ain't here." He stepped back toward the door. "Warm now ain't the same as warm when it kills." The door closed behind him. And just like that, the warmth in the room remained. But the verdict was still waiting. The first real freeze did not arrive with force. It settled in. Late November brought a cold that held through the night, quiet, steady, enough to test what a house could keep without help. That evening, Lemuel Voss built a longer fire. Not hotter, longer, measured loads. Even intervals. Letting the heat move where it was meant to go through the flue, into the stone, into the mass beneath the floor. He did not overfeed it. He did not chase heat. He let the system take what it could carry, then he stopped. No midnight tending, no rising in the dark. The fire burned down, to coals, then to nothing. Silence took the room. Outside, the cold deepened. Inside, there was no visible heat left. Morning came without warning. No crackle, no glow, just still air. Miriam crossed the floor once, no hesitation, and moved on with her work. That was all. Lemuel rose and walked the full span of the room. Slow, not searching, reading. The floor did not give back sharp warmth. It gave resistance to cold. It did not pull heat from the body. It held its own. He paused near the far wall, where most cabins failed first. Stayed there a moment longer. No change. No drop. The system was carrying the night. He took out the notebook. Wrote once. No fire at dawn. Floor holding. Cold not taking ground. Closed it. No adjustment followed. Because nothing had broken. The fire had ended hours before. And still the house did not give the cold a place to begin. The first freeze had tested the system. January would judge it. In 1888, the cold did not arrive in waves. It dropped. Fast. Hard. Final. The temperature fell past what men called livable and kept going until it settled at 42 below. Not the kind of cold that howled and warned. This one moved in silence. The north wind did not roar. It cut. It reached into seams, into joints, into every place a house was not sealed, with absolute intent, and it took what it found. Heat first. Then comfort. Then sleep. Wood creaked under stress. Mortar lines tightened, then began to split where they had been laid too thin. Frost formed inside walls. Iron stiffened. Breath turned sharp in the throat. Across the valley, the same scene began to repeat, quickly, without mercy. A family abandoned their main room before midnight, dragging blankets and children into the corner where the stove held strongest. They did not spread out. They collapsed inward, chasing a shrinking circle of warmth. A bachelor settler burned through his stacked wood before dawn, then fed the fire with what remained: sled runners, broken crate boards, anything that would catch. The flame rose higher. The room did not follow. At another cabin, Asa Pike, a freight hauler who trusted strength over subtlety, worked his hearth like a forge. More wood, then more again. The fire roared. The floor stayed cold. He stood over it, breathing hard, watching heat climb away from him, up, out, gone, while the ground beneath his boots remained like stone pulled from a grave. Across from him, the fire demanded more, and still gave less. Not far off, Nels Halvorsen woke for the third time that night, not from noise, from cold. His feet had gone numb beneath the blankets. The fire had dropped lower than he thought. He rose, fed it again, watched it catch, then waited too long for the warmth to reach him. It didn't. He sat there, staring at it, as if force alone might make it stay. But force was not the rule anymore. Nature had already taken the room. And it was not arguing. It was measuring. Quietly, patiently, pressing against every structure until something gave. Until weakness showed itself without needing to be named. Because in that kind of cold, there were no opinions left. No debates. No second chances. Only one question remained, waiting for morning. What holds when everything else lets go? And then there was the Voss cabin. No noise marked the difference. No surge. No struggle. No frantic feeding of flame. Inside, the trial was already underway, and it was quiet. Lemuel Voss did not burn harder. He burned on rhythm. One firing in the morning, one in the late day. Measured loads. Nothing wasted. Nothing forced. Each burn fed into the mass beneath the floor, not the air above it. Outside, the wind struck the walls through the night. It searched for weakness, pressed against seams, took what it could take. Inside, the stone answered slowly. The pavers did not flare with heat. They released it, steady, even, continuous. Ruth knelt near the center of the room, her stocking feet flat against the floor, small hands busy with nothing urgent. She did not shift away from the ground. She did not need to. Caleb lay stretched out nearby, a primer open in front of him, reading without curling toward any one spot. There was no warm corner. The room held. Miriam moved through her work without heavy boots. No layering against the floor. No retreat from it. The house did not push her upward. It met her where she stood. At the far side, Lemuel opened his notebook again. Not to check. To confirm. Floor holding, near 70. Air at living height, mid-50s. Fuel holding low. He closed it. No announcement followed. Because there was nothing to argue. The fire was not fighting the cold. It had already done its work. What remained was not flame. It was stored, held in stone, released in time. Outside, other houses burned harder and lost faster. Inside this one, the cold found no easy place to take hold. No weak direction to exploit. No empty space to carry heat away. And so it did the only thing left to it. It pressed and failed. Quietly. Because the truth of the system did not arrive like a victory. It arrived like something simpler. The house refused to die the way the others were dying. And in that refusal, everything was proven. By the third night of that cold, strength had nothing left to prove. Men who trusted it were already tired. That was when Nels Halverson came to the Voss cabin. Not to argue, not to warn, just one sentence. Show me. Lemuel stepped aside. No explanation, no preparation. Nels crossed the threshold. 1 step, 2, 3, and his body reacted before his mind could. He stopped. There was no roaring fire, no open flame to stand beside, no single place to gather heat from. And yet the cold was not there. Not in the air. Not at the knees. Not rising from the floor like it had in his own home. He took another step in. Slower now. Testing without meaning to. Then he crouched and set his hand down on the stone. Flat. Still. He held it there longer than a man needed to feel warmth. Because what he felt was not just heat. It was evenness. No cold edges. No dead zones at the corners. No place where the warmth failed and the ground took over again. The entire floor held. Nels stood up, but he did not step back. Lemuel reached for the notebook and handed it to him. No words, just pages. Outside temperature, inside air at living height. Surface heat across the floor. Fuel used over a full day. Nels read each line once, then again, slow. Not like a man checking numbers. Like a man watching something break, because what he held in his hands did not match what he had lived through the past 3 nights. Same land, same cold, same fuel, different outcome. He closed the notebook halfway, then stopped, looked once more at the figures, then around the room, children on the floor. No strain in their bodies, no fight for position near heat. He let out a breath he had been holding since he stepped inside. The heat ain't leaving, he said quietly. Not to Lemuel, to himself. A pause. Then the rest followed, without resistance. We've been sending it up, into empty air. No argument remained, no defense, to hold. Because this was not a man admitting defeat. It was something cleaner than that. A way of thinking ending. After Nels Halverson walked out of that cabin, he did not argue for it. He didn't need to. By the next day, the direction of travel had changed. Men no longer slowed their wagons to look and laugh. They stopped to step down, to walk in, to feel. One by one, they crossed the same threshold Nels had crossed, boots carrying cold in, eyes expecting to find the same trick, the same flaw. And one by one, they stopped in the same place, mid-room, listening with their bodies before their minds could catch up. Gloves came off, hands went down. Stone answered. Clara Dempsey, a widow who had spent too many nights waking to feed a fire that never held, pressed her palm flat against the floor and stayed there longer than she meant to. She did not ask first. She checked first. Then she looked at Miriam. Feels the same everywhere, she said. Miriam nodded once. Across the room, Hester Vale, who had buried a husband 2 winters back and had no interest in repeating that kind of loss, asked the question no one had asked before. Can it be done after? She said. To a house already standing? Not whether it worked. Whether it could be carried forward. Near the doorway, Asa Pike stood quiet. The same man who had burned sled runners and table legs now watched the floor like it had wronged him. Not angry, not proud, just tired. Took everything I had, he said low. Still froze under it. No one answered him. They didn't need to. The answer was under his boots. Lemuel did not gather them, did not lecture. He moved through the space and showed what mattered. Depth of the chamber, length of the run, where to leave access, how to set the slope, how to mix the clay so it would move with heat and not break under it. Men who had laughed now wrote, not fast, carefully, because this time, the details were not something to dismiss. They were something to hold on to. Miriam watched it all without speaking. Watched the same hands that once pointed now measure. Watched the same voices that called it foolish, now ask how to build it. She looked once at Lemuel. You're giving it away, she said. He did not look up from the stone he was pointing to. If it stays with me, he said, it don't help anyone else stay warm. No pride in it, no claim, just a simple truth. What had been called crazy was now being carried from one house to the next. What Lemuel Voss built did not end with that winter. Because one winter can be argued, a pattern cannot. In the years that followed, the design did not spread as a story. It spread as a method. Cabin by cabin, a few families in Valley County began to rebuild beneath their floors. Not identical, not perfect copies. Each one adjusted to its own ground, its own stone, its own hands. But the principle stayed. Do not spend heat where no one lives. Do not let it leave before it has worked. And slowly, the talk in that valley changed. Men still spoke of cold, still measured winters by how low the temperature fell, but another question began to take its place beside that one. Not just how cold it got, but which houses held. The Voss cabin stood through it all. Not as a curiosity, not as a gamble that paid off once. As a structure that continued to answer the same question, year after year, without changing its answer. Time tested it the way winter had. Without mercy, without exception, and it held. Years later, when part of the floor was open to repair a section of the house, the flue beneath it remained as it had been laid. The same run, the same slope, the same sealed joints that had carried heat from one end to the other. No trick revealed, no hidden flaw exposed. Just a system that had worked because it followed something deeper than preference. It followed law. Miriam Voss, who had once stood at that same ground and seen only risk, watched her children grow across that floor without ever learning to fear it. They did not pull their feet up from cold boards. They did not sleep above the ground to escape it. They lived on it. And that was the quietest proof of all, because the house did not demand attention anymore. It did what it was built to do, without needing to be explained again. In the end, the land did not change for Lemuel Voss. The cold did not soften. The wind did not spare his walls. Nature did not make room for his idea. It judged it, the same way it judged everything else. And the difference was simple. He did not try to fight those rules. He built with them. Because out there, on that ground, survival was never given to the strongest fire. It belonged to the man who understood where that fire had to go. When winter hits hardest, would you trust a fire you can see? Or one that works where you live?